For thousands of years, people have uncovered discoveries that seem almost impossible. Giant stones fitted together without mortar, a wheel buried beneath an ancient marsh, a pillar of iron that refuses to rust, forgotten cities swallowed by the jungle, mysterious artifacts carved with astonishing precision, and monuments that continue to puzzle archaeologists to this day. Some have changed the way we understand history. Others remain unexplained. Tonight, we'll travel across deserts, mountains, forests, and lost civilizations to uncover some of history's greatest mysteries. Before we begin, don't forget to subscribe, and let us know where you're watching from tonight, because the next discovery might change the way you see the ancient world forever. The ancient wheel that changed everything. For thousands of years, one simple invention quietly changed the course of human history. It carried food across villages. It transported stone for monuments. It helped build civilizations. And eventually, it connected the ancient world in ways that had never been possible before. But what if one of the oldest wheels ever discovered wasn't found beneath a great city, or inside the tomb of a powerful king, but hidden beneath an ordinary swamp? For nearly 5,000 years, it remained buried beneath layers of mud and water, completely forgotten, until archaeologists uncovered a discovery that forced historians to look at one of humanity's greatest inventions in an entirely new way. This remarkable object is known today as the Ljubljana Marshes wheel. It was discovered just south of Slovenia's modern capital, in a vast wetland known as the Ljubljana Marshes. Today, the marshes appear peaceful. Shallow pools of water reflect the sky. Tall reeds sway gently in the wind. Small wooden walkways cross patches of soft ground where birds nest among the grasses. It feels like a quiet place where very little ever changes. Yet beneath this calm landscape lies one of Europe's richest prehistoric archaeological sites. Thousands of years ago, this region looked very different. The marshes were home to farming communities who had learned how to live with the water instead of fighting against it. Rather than building directly on the damp ground, they raised their homes on sturdy wooden piles driven deep into the soil. From a distance, their villages would have appeared to float above the wetlands. Narrow wooden walkways connected one house to another. Smoke drifted from small hearths. Fishing boats crossed the quiet waterways. Children played beside the edge of the marsh while farmers worked nearby fields. It was a peaceful world, but it was also a remarkably inventive one. For generations, archaeologists explored these wetlands searching for traces of the people who once lived here. Every excavation revealed another small piece of the story. Fragments of pottery, stone tools, animal bones, wooden posts that once supported entire villages. Then, during excavations in 2002, researchers noticed something unusual emerging from the dark soil. At first, it appeared to be nothing more than another weathered piece of timber. That wasn't unusual. The marsh often preserved ancient wood remarkably well, but as archaeologists carefully brushed away the surrounding mud, the shape slowly became clearer. A perfect curve. Then another. Before long, an entire wooden wheel began to emerge from the earth. Lying nearby was something equally remarkable. Its axle. The two pieces had remained together for almost 5,000 years. The discovery immediately attracted international attention. Wood rarely survives for such extraordinary lengths of time. Normally, it decays within centuries, disappearing long before archaeologists have any chance to find it. Here, however, the constantly wet soil created almost perfect conditions for preservation. The thick layers of oxygen-poor mud protected the timber from insects, bacteria, and decay. Without the marsh, the wheel would almost certainly have vanished forever. As researchers began studying the discovery, they realized they were looking at something extraordinary. The wheel measured just over 70 centimeters across. It had been carefully carved from two large pieces of ash wood, joined together with precisely fitted oak pegs. The craftsmanship was impressive. Every surface had been carefully shaped. Every joint had a purpose. Nothing about its construction appeared crude or experimental. Whoever built it understood exactly what they were doing. The axle was equally fascinating. Unlike many later wagons, where the wheel spins around a fixed axle, this design allowed the axle and wheel to rotate together. It was an elegant engineering solution that worked surprisingly well for the rough ground surrounding the marshes. It also revealed something unexpected. This was not the invention of beginners. Ideas like this usually develop slowly over many generations, which raises an intriguing question. If this wheel already displayed such careful engineering, how many earlier wheels have simply disappeared without leaving any trace? Using tree ring dating and radiocarbon analysis, researchers determined that the wheel was built around 3150 BC. That makes it one of the oldest wooden wheels ever discovered anywhere in the world. It was already ancient when Stonehenge was still taking shape, ancient when the first great pyramids of Egypt had yet to rise above the desert. For many years, historians believed the wheel spread outward from a single region before reaching the rest of Europe. But discoveries like the Ljubljana Marshes wheel suggest the story may not be so simple. Perhaps knowledge traveled much farther than we once imagined, or perhaps different communities, separated by hundreds of kilometers, solved the same problem in remarkably similar ways. The answer remains uncertain. Imagine standing here 5,000 years ago. The morning sun rises above the marsh. Mist drifts across the shallow water. A farmer loads baskets of grain onto a small wooden cart. Nearby, another family carries freshly cut timber from the forest. Children run across narrow walkways connecting the houses. And quietly, almost unnoticed, a simple wooden wheel begins to turn. No one living there could have imagined how important that invention would become. It would eventually carry traders across continents, move the stones used to build cities, support armies, power machines, and transform nearly every civilization that followed. Yet one of its oldest surviving examples began its journey here, in a quiet marshland, built by people whose names have long been forgotten. Today, the Ljubljana Marshes wheel is far more than an ancient artifact displayed inside a museum. It is a reminder that some of history's greatest innovations did not begin inside famous empires or magnificent palaces. Sometimes they began in small communities, in forgotten villages, in places so ordinary that the world almost overlooked them completely. And beneath the still waters of an ancient marsh, one simple wheel waited nearly 5,000 years to tell its story once again. The stone walls that shouldn't exist. What if I told you there are walls so perfectly built that even after hundreds of years, you still can't slide a sheet of paper between the stones? No mortar, no cement, no modern machines, just enormous blocks of rock, cut into dozens of different shapes, and fitted together so perfectly that they almost appear to have softened before being pressed into place. For centuries, these walls have stood against earthquakes that destroyed much newer buildings around them. Even today, engineers continue asking the same question. How did ancient people achieve workmanship that still seems almost impossible? High in the Andes Mountains of Peru, where narrow streets wind through the old city of Cusco, visitors often stop in complete silence the first time they stand before these remarkable walls. At first, they seem almost ordinary. Gray stones, weathered surfaces, ancient foundations supporting buildings constructed centuries later. But the longer you look, the stranger they become. Every stone is different. Some have 6 sides, others have 10. Some contain 12 or even more carefully shaped angles. Yet every block locks perfectly into the next like pieces of an enormous 3-dimensional puzzle. There are no straight rows, no identical shapes. Nothing about the construction appears simple. These remarkable structures are known as polygonal masonry, one of the greatest achievements of Inca engineering. Examples can be found throughout Cusco, Sacsayhuaman, Ollantaytambo, and several other ancient sites scattered across the Peruvian Andes. Together, they represent one of the finest examples of stone construction ever created. The first Spanish explorers who entered Cusco during the 16th century were astonished by what they found. Many had seen the castles of Europe, the cathedrals of Spain, the great cities of the Mediterranean, yet even they admitted they had never encountered stonework quite like this. One chronicler described the walls as being fitted together with such perfection that the joints were almost invisible. Centuries later, that description still holds true. Some of the largest stones weigh dozens of tons. At nearby Sacsayhuaman, individual blocks reach well over 100 tons. Moving such enormous pieces would have been a challenge by itself. Shaping each one so precisely made the task even more extraordinary. Unlike builders who relied upon identical rectangular blocks, the Inca craftsmen shaped every stone individually. One block was carefully carved, then lifted into position. The neighboring stone was gradually shaped to match it, again and again, until every surface touched almost perfectly. It was an incredibly slow process, but the results were astonishing. One of the most famous examples is the celebrated 12-angled stone in Cusco. Its 12 carefully carved edges fit seamlessly against the surrounding blocks without the use of mortar. It has become one of Peru's most recognizable archaeological treasures, yet it is only one stone among thousands. Perhaps even more remarkable is how these walls behave during earthquakes. Modern buildings often crack when the ground begins to shake. Rigid walls collapse under sudden movement. But polygonal masonry behaves differently. Because each stone fits tightly while still allowing tiny amounts of movement, the walls can flex as the earth moves beneath them. Instead of breaking apart, the stones settle back into place, time after time, earthquake after earthquake. This remarkable flexibility has allowed many Inca walls to survive disasters that destroyed much of the Spanish architecture built directly above them. Exactly how the builders achieved such extraordinary precision remains a subject of continuing study. Archaeologists believe they relied upon careful planning, repeated testing, stone hammers, abrasion using sand, and remarkable patience rather than lost technology or mysterious machines. Every surface appears to have been adjusted little by little until the fit became almost perfect. The work may have taken weeks, or even months, for a single block. Imagine standing here more than 500 years ago. The sound of stone striking stone echoes through the valley. Dust rises into the mountain air. Teams of workers slowly guide another massive block into position using ropes, wooden levers, and determination. Master craftsmen kneel beside the stone, studying every tiny gap before removing it once again for further shaping. Nothing is rushed. Nothing is forced. Every movement brings the wall one step closer to perfection. The result was far more than beautiful architecture. These walls became the foundation of an empire stretching across thousands of kilometers of mountains, valleys, deserts, and forests. Cities rose upon them. Temples were built beside them. Generations lived within their protection. Even after the Inca Empire disappeared, the walls remained. Today, visitors from around the world still run their fingers across the ancient joints, searching for the slightest opening between the stones. Most find none. Only questions. Questions about skill. Questions about patience. Questions about what ancient builders were truly capable of. Perhaps that is why the stone walls of Peru continue to fascinate archaeologists today. Not because they were built by magic, not because they hide impossible secrets, but because they remind us that human craftsmanship, given enough time and knowledge, can sometimes appear almost impossible. And after more than 5 centuries, the mountains of Peru still guard one of the greatest engineering achievements the ancient world ever produced. vidIQ, the granite vases that shouldn't exist. What if I told you some of the most mysterious objects from ancient Egypt aren't the pyramids or the temples, but ordinary-looking stone jars? No gold, no jewels, no elaborate carvings, just smooth granite vases, carved thousands of years ago with a level of precision that continues to spark debate today. Some are perfectly symmetrical. Some have walls only a few millimeters thick. Others have long, narrow necks that seem almost impossible to hollow out using the tools ancient Egyptians are believed to have possessed. Even today, they remain one of the most remarkable examples of ancient craftsmanship ever discovered. Many of these vessels were found beneath the oldest pyramid complex in Egypt. Others appeared inside ancient tombs and royal burial sites that had remained sealed for centuries. Most date back to Egypt's early dynastic period, more than 4,500 years ago, before many of the country's greatest monuments had even been built. At first glance, the vases don't appear extraordinary. Most stand only a few inches tall. Some have elegant curved bodies. Others are simple cylinders with narrow openings. Their polished surfaces reflect light almost like modern stonework. Only when examined closely does the mystery begin to emerge. Unlike softer stones such as limestone or alabaster, many of these vessels were carved from extremely hard materials. Granite, diorite, basalt, quartz-rich stone that remains difficult to shape even with modern tools. Granite, in particular, is one of the hardest building materials used by the ancient Egyptians. Shaping its exterior is already a demanding task. Carving out its interior is even more challenging. Yet somehow, ancient craftsmen created hollow chambers deep inside solid blocks of stone. Some openings are so narrow that a human hand could never fit inside. That immediately raises an obvious question. How did they remove the stone from the interior? Archaeologists believe Egyptian craftsmen relied on copper tools, stone pounders, quartz sand, patience, and extraordinary skill. Rather than cutting directly through the granite, The abrasive sand gradually wore the surface away. The process would have been slow, very slow, perhaps taking weeks or even months to complete a single vessel. Whatever method they used, the results are astonishing. Modern researchers studying these vases have noticed something unusual. Many display remarkable symmetry. The curves appear carefully balanced. The walls often maintain nearly equal thickness from one side to the other. Even the rims are finished with exceptional precision. Every surface suggests careful planning rather than simple decoration. Imagine standing inside an Egyptian workshop more than 4,000 years ago. The air is filled with the sound of stone striking stone. Dust hangs in the sunlight. Master craftsmen slowly rotate a block of granite while assistants add fresh sand and water to the cutting surface. Hour after hour, day after day, tiny amounts of stone disappear. Progress is almost invisible. But slowly, the rough block begins transforming into a perfectly balanced vessel. The finished vase may never have carried food or water. Many archaeologists believe these objects held precious oils, perfumes, ceremonial offerings, or sacred materials used during religious rituals. Others were placed inside royal tombs to accompany the dead into the afterlife. Whatever their purpose, they clearly held great value. Only the finest craftsmen could have produced them. Thousands of years later, many remain astonishingly well preserved. Their polished surfaces still catch the light. Their delicate shapes remain almost untouched despite the passing centuries. Some have survived wars, earthquakes, floods, and tomb robbers. Others rested quietly beneath the sands of Egypt until archaeologists carefully lifted them back into daylight. Today, the granite vases continue to fascinate historians, engineers, and stoneworkers alike. Not because they prove lost civilizations or forgotten technologies, but because they demonstrate just how extraordinary ancient Egyptian craftsmanship truly was. The people who created them left behind no written instructions, no workshop manuals, no detailed explanations, only the finished objects themselves. Perhaps that is why these simple stone vessels continue to inspire so much curiosity. They remind us that history is often measured not only by gigantic monuments, but also by the smallest objects. A polished surface, a perfectly balanced curve, a hollow chamber carved from one of the hardest stones on earth, and the quiet skill of craftsmen whose names have long since disappeared, while their remarkable work continues to challenge our understanding of what was possible thousands of years ago. The tiny statue that should never have been there. What if I told you one of America's most controversial archaeological discoveries could fit in the palm of your hand? Not a giant temple, not an ancient pyramid, not a lost city buried beneath the desert. Instead, a tiny clay figurine, barely 4 centimeters tall, with carefully carved eyes, folded arms, and a mysterious expression that has puzzled researchers for more than a century. The mystery isn't what it looks like. The mystery is where it was supposedly found, deep beneath the ground, far below layers of ancient sediment, in a place where no human artifact was expected to exist. Even today, the story continues to divide historians, geologists, and archaeologists alike. The object has become known as the Nampa figurine, named after the small town of Nampa in the American state of Idaho. The landscape surrounding Nampa is wide and open. Rivers wind through fertile valleys. Low mountains rise in the distance. Today, it is a region of farms and quiet communities. But in the late 19th century, it was also a place where engineers were drilling deep wells to reach underground water hidden beneath the earth. In 1889, workers began drilling one of those wells. The drill pushed deeper and deeper through layers of clay, sand, and gravel that had remained undisturbed for an incredibly long time. Everything seemed routine, until something unexpected appeared. Among the material brought up from deep underground was a tiny clay figure unlike anything the workers expected to see. At first glance, it resembled a small human form. Its head was clearly defined. Its shoulders were rounded. Simple lines suggested clothing or decoration across its body. Despite its tiny size, someone had taken great care while shaping it. News of the discovery spread quickly. The little figure soon attracted scientists from across the United States. If the reports about its depth were accurate, the implications appeared extraordinary. Some early accounts claimed the figurine had come from sediments believed to be extremely ancient, much older than the accepted age of human occupation in North America according to 19th century scientific understanding. Almost immediately, debate began. Could the object truly have come from that depth? Or had it somehow entered the drill by accident? Over the years, researchers proposed many different explanations. Some believed the figurine had slipped into the well during drilling. Others suggested it may have fallen into the equipment before excavation even began. Another possibility was that the surrounding sediments had been disturbed long before the drilling took place. If any of those explanations were correct, the mystery would disappear. Yet none could be proven with complete certainty. The figurine itself adds another layer of curiosity. Unlike many prehistoric carvings found elsewhere in North America, its style appears unusually refined. The tiny face was shaped with surprising care. The proportions of the body seem deliberate rather than accidental. Even after more than a century, researchers continue examining photographs and historical records, hoping to better understand exactly what they are looking at. Imagine standing beside the drilling rig on that day in 1889. Steam rises from the machinery. Workers wipe thick clay from freshly lifted sediment. Then someone notices something unusual resting among the wet earth. At first, it looks like an oddly shaped pebble. A closer look reveals a tiny face. The entire crew gathers around. No one quite understands what they are holding. What should have been an ordinary day of drilling suddenly becomes one of the most debated discoveries in American archaeology. Today, most archaeologists remain cautious about the story. Without modern excavation methods, it is impossible to verify exactly where the figurine originally came from. 19th century drilling simply did not record evidence with the precision expected today. That uncertainty has kept the object suspended between archaeology and mystery for more than 100 years. Yet even if the figurine did not originate from the great depth reported in early accounts, it still serves as an important reminder of how archaeology works. Extraordinary discoveries demand extraordinary evidence. Every claim must be tested, every theory questioned, every piece of evidence examined with patience rather than assumption. Perhaps that is why the Nampa figurine continues to capture the imagination. Not because it has rewritten history, and not because it has answered impossible questions, but because it reminds us that sometimes the greatest archaeological mysteries are not created by what we find. They are created by how little we truly know about where an object began its journey. A tiny figure, a deep well, one remarkable discovery, and a mystery that has refused to disappear for well over a century. The giant bowl buried with a princess. What if I told you one of the greatest treasures ever discovered in ancient Europe wasn't made of gold, or silver, or precious jewels, but a gigantic bronze vessel so enormous that no one can fully explain why it was buried? Not inside a palace, not beneath a famous temple, but hidden beneath an ancient burial mound beside a young Celtic woman who had been dead for more than 2,000 years. Together, they became one of archaeology's most extraordinary discoveries. Today, this remarkable object is known as the Vix crater. It remains the largest ancient bronze vessel ever found, and even now, it continues to raise questions about power, trade, and the forgotten kingdoms that once ruled Iron Age Europe. The story begins in eastern France, near the quiet village of Vix. The countryside is peaceful. Rolling hills stretch across the landscape. Fields of wheat cover the valleys. Small forests break the horizon. Nothing about the area suggests that it once stood along one of Europe's most important trade routes. Yet more than 2,500 years ago, merchants, craftsmen, and travelers regularly passed through this region. Goods arrived from the Mediterranean. Amber traveled from the Baltic. Tin came from distant lands. Ideas moved alongside the caravans. Long before Rome dominated Europe, powerful Celtic communities had already established thriving settlements here. In 1953, archaeologists began excavating a large burial mound near the village. Burial mounds were not unusual. Many had already been explored across Europe. Most contained weapons, pottery, or simple grave goods. No one expected this excavation to become one of the greatest archaeological discoveries of the 20th century. As workers carefully removed the layers of earth, they uncovered the remains of an ancient wooden burial chamber. Inside rested the skeleton of a woman believed to have been around 30 years old. She wore an extraordinary gold torque around her neck. Fine jewelry surrounded her. A richly decorated wagon had carried her into the grave. Everything suggested she had held an exceptionally high position within Celtic society. But then the archaeologists noticed something even more astonishing. Occupying nearly an entire corner of the burial chamber stood an enormous bronze vessel, unlike anything they had ever seen. It was almost 1.5 meters tall, large enough for an adult to stand inside. The vessel weighed more than 200 kilograms. Its massive handles were decorated with finely detailed figures. Around its rim marched beautifully crafted warriors and horse-drawn chariots. Every surface reflected remarkable artistic skill. This was no ordinary container. It was the largest bronze crater ever discovered from the ancient world. A crater was traditionally used by the ancient Greeks for mixing wine with water during great feasts and religious ceremonies. That detail immediately created another mystery. The burial belonged to a Celtic princess in central France. Yet the vessel itself had clearly been made by Greek craftsmen, probably somewhere in southern Italy during the 6th century BC. How had such an extraordinary object traveled more than 1,000 kilometers across Europe? Archaeologists believe it arrived through long-distance trade networks connecting the Mediterranean world with powerful Celtic communities far to the north. Luxury goods moved from one kingdom to another. In return, traders sought valuable metals, salt, amber, and other resources found across ancient Europe. The Vix crater became powerful evidence that these distant civilizations were far more connected than historians once imagined. Imagine the day it first arrived. A caravan appears on the horizon. Oxen slowly pull heavy wagons loaded with precious cargo. Villagers gather as merchants carefully uncover the enormous bronze vessel. Sunlight reflects from its polished surface. No one has ever seen anything so large, so beautifully crafted, so impossibly valuable. For the local rulers, it would have represented not only wealth, but prestige, a symbol that their influence reached far beyond the forests and rivers of ancient Gaul. The young woman buried beside it remains equally fascinating. Historians often refer to her as the Lady of Vix or the Princess of Vix, although her true name has been lost forever. Her burial suggests she belonged to the highest levels of Celtic society. Perhaps she ruled a powerful community. Perhaps she controlled important trade routes. Or perhaps she served an important religious role within her people. Without written records, her story remains incomplete. Yet the treasures buried beside her reveal a life of remarkable importance. Today, the Vix crater stands as one of Europe's greatest archaeological treasures, not because it was hidden beneath a king, not because it contained unimaginable riches, but because it tells the story of a forgotten world where Celtic rulers, Greek craftsmen, and distant kingdoms were connected by trade, diplomacy, and ambition long before the rise of the Roman Empire. A giant bronze vessel, a mysterious princess, a forgotten kingdom beneath the hills of France, and one remarkable discovery that reminds us the ancient world was far more connected than we once believed. vidIQ. The underground world hidden beneath Vietnam. What if I told you an entire underground world exists beneath the forests of Vietnam? A place with hidden homes, secret hospitals, underground kitchens, schools, meeting rooms, and tunnels stretching for hundreds of kilometers beneath the earth. From above, you would never know it was there. The forest appears completely ordinary. Tall trees sway in the breeze. Birds sing overhead. Sunlight filters through the leaves. Yet only a few feet below the ground lies one of the most remarkable underground engineering systems ever built. Known today as the Cu Chi Tunnels, this vast network continues to astonish historians, engineers, and archaeologists alike. Located northwest of Ho Chi Minh City, the tunnels wind beneath a landscape of tropical forests, rivers, and red clay soil. Today, the region feels peaceful. Small villages dot the countryside. Motorbikes pass along quiet roads. Farmers work the surrounding fields. It is difficult to imagine that beneath this calm landscape once existed an entire hidden world where thousands of people lived for years without being seen. The story of the tunnels began long before they became famous. During the late 1940s, local resistance fighters started digging small underground passages by hand. At first, they were simple hiding places: a short tunnel, a concealed room, just enough space to escape danger. But as the years passed, the network continued to grow. Each generation added new sections, new chambers, new escape routes. Eventually, the separate tunnels connected together, forming one enormous underground maze. By the height of the Vietnam War, the system stretched for more than 200 kilometers. Some passages were barely wide enough for a single person to crawl through. Others opened into surprisingly large underground rooms where people could gather safely beneath the forest floor. It became an entire hidden community. Families lived underground. Children were born there. Meals were prepared beneath the earth. Medical operations were performed inside hidden hospitals. Weapons were repaired in underground workshops. Meetings were held in secret command rooms connected by narrow passageways that twisted beneath the jungle. The builders understood their environment remarkably well. The tunnels followed the natural strength of the hard clay beneath the forest. This soil remained stable even during heavy rain, reducing the risk of collapse. Small ventilation shafts were carefully disguised among tree roots, termite mounds, and thick vegetation. From above, they were almost impossible to notice. Fresh air quietly reached deep into the underground network without revealing its location. Entrances were equally ingenious. Many were no larger than a sheet of paper. Hidden beneath leaves or carefully fitted wooden covers, they blended perfectly into the forest floor. Someone could disappear underground in only a few seconds. Moments later, there would be almost no sign they had ever been there. Life below the surface was never easy. The tunnels were dark, hot, humid. Air was limited. Insects and snakes sometimes found their way inside. Every movement required crawling through narrow passages where standing upright was impossible. Yet despite these harsh conditions, thousands of people endured life beneath the ground for years. Imagine standing in the forest during that time. The jungle appears completely silent. Nothing moves. Nothing seems unusual. Then suddenly, a hidden wooden hatch quietly lifts from the ground. A figure disappears beneath the earth. Within seconds, the entrance closes once again. The forest looks exactly as it did before. Unless you knew where to look, the underground world remained invisible. Perhaps the most astonishing achievement was not the tunnels themselves, but the planning behind them. The network contained multiple levels. Some sections reached only a few meters below the surface. Others descended much deeper, providing protection during heavy bombardment. Secret exits opened beside rivers. Others emerged inside dense vegetation hundreds of meters away. The builders constantly expanded, repaired, and improved the system as circumstances changed. Today, many sections of the Kuchi tunnels have been preserved as historical sites. Visitors can walk through reconstructed chambers and experience just how narrow the passages really were. For most people, only a few minutes underground is enough to appreciate the extraordinary determination required to build and survive within such a place. The tunnels remain one of the most remarkable engineering achievements created not by massive machines, but by ordinary people working patiently beneath the earth. Armed with little more than simple hand tools, determination, and an intimate understanding of the landscape around them, they created an underground world that remained hidden in plain sight. Perhaps that is why the Kuchi tunnels continue to fascinate visitors from around the world. Not because they contain forgotten treasure, not because they were built by an ancient civilization, but because they remind us that some of history's most extraordinary engineering projects were created not to impress the world, but simply to survive. Beneath an ordinary forest lies an invisible city, a maze of tunnels, a hidden world beneath our feet, and one of the most astonishing underground networks ever built by human hands. The statue that cried without a voice. What if I told you a simple religious statue once attracted thousands of visitors because people believed it was crying real human tears? Not inside an ancient temple, not hidden beneath a forgotten tomb, but standing quietly inside an ordinary church. Its face never moved. Its expression never changed. Yet witnesses claimed they watched clear drops of liquid slowly form beneath its eyes, before rolling gently down its cheeks. Some believed they were witnessing a miracle. Others searched for a scientific explanation. More than half a century later, the debate has never truly ended. Stories of weeping statues have appeared throughout history. Reports have come from Europe, Asia, North and South America, often during periods of uncertainty, conflict, or personal tragedy. Some statues were said to shed clear tears. Others appeared to weep oil. A few were even reported to produce what looked like blood. Each new claim attracted enormous crowds. Some came hoping for answers. Others arrived simply wanting to see the phenomenon with their own eyes. Among the most famous cases occurred in the city of Syracuse, Sicily, in 1953. A small plaster statue of the Virgin Mary stood inside the home of a young married couple. It looked completely ordinary, mass-produced, only a few inches tall. Nothing about it suggested that it would soon become known around the world. According to reports, clear liquid suddenly began appearing beneath the statue's eyes. Family members noticed it first. Soon neighbors gathered, then priests, doctors, police officers. Within days, thousands of curious visitors filled the surrounding streets hoping to witness the strange event themselves. Many claimed they saw the tears forming naturally. Some described watching individual drops slowly slide down the statue's face. Others reported collecting the liquid in small cloths or glass containers. The story spread rapidly through newspapers and radio broadcasts across Europe. Scientists were soon invited to investigate. Samples of the mysterious liquid were collected and examined. Several contemporary reports stated that laboratory testing suggested the liquid shared characteristics with human tears. Those findings immediately fueled even greater public fascination. Yet scientists also pointed out an important limitation. Knowing what a liquid resembles does not explain where it came from. That question remained unanswered. Skeptics proposed many possible explanations. Perhaps tiny cracks inside the plaster absorbed moisture before slowly releasing it through capillary action. Others suggested hidden condensation, environmental humidity, or even deliberate fraud. Over the years, investigators examined numerous reported weeping statues. Some cases were eventually explained by natural causes. Others were exposed as hoaxes. A smaller number remained unresolved simply because there was never enough evidence to reach a definitive conclusion. Imagine entering the small Sicilian home during those first days. The room is silent. Dozens of people stand without speaking. Their eyes remain fixed upon the tiny white statue. Then someone quietly points. A clear droplet begins forming beneath one eye. It grows larger. For several seconds, no one moves. Then the tiny drop slowly travels down the statue's face. Whether miracle or mystery, it is easy to understand why those present never forgot the moment. Throughout history, reports of weeping statues have often appeared during times of hardship. For believers, the tears became symbols of compassion, warning, or hope. For historians, they reveal how powerful faith can shape communities during moments of uncertainty. For scientists, each report presents another opportunity to investigate unusual physical processes that may not be immediately understood. The truth is that every case is different. Some have convincing natural explanations. Some have been proven fraudulent. Others remain impossible to investigate because the original evidence no longer exists. Without careful documentation, certainty becomes difficult. That uncertainty has allowed the stories to endure across generations. Today, the weeping statues remain among the world's most enduring religious mysteries, not because every report has been proven true, and not because every report has been proven false, but because they exist at the unusual meeting point between faith, history, eyewitness testimony, and scientific investigation. A silent statue, a single tear, thousands of witnesses, and a mystery that continues to inspire belief, curiosity, and debate wherever the story is told. vidIQ. The footprints left before history began. What if I told you the oldest journey ever discovered wasn't written in stone, or carved onto the walls of a temple, but pressed into soft volcanic ash by someone simply taking a walk? No monuments, no cities, no tools, just footprints, step after step, preserved for millions of years beneath the African sun. They belong to no known civilization, no forgotten kingdom, no lost empire. Instead, they tell the story of something far older. The moment one of our earliest ancestors walked across a quiet landscape, leaving behind evidence that would survive longer than almost anything humans have ever created. Today, these remarkable tracks are known as the Laetoli footprints, one of the most extraordinary discoveries in the history of archaeology and human evolution. They lie in northern Tanzania, not far from the vast plains of the Serengeti and the towering volcanoes of the Great Rift Valley. Today, the landscape feels wild and open. Acacia trees dot the horizon. Herds of animals wander across the grasslands. The wind carries dust over ancient volcanic hills. It is a place that still feels connected to another age. Millions of years ago, however, the region looked very different. Volcanoes shaped the land. Ash regularly drifted across the plains. Small groups of early human ancestors shared the landscape with elephants, antelope, giant birds, and predators unlike anything alive today. Then, one day, a nearby volcano erupted. A blanket of fine ash settled gently across the ground. Not long afterward, light rain fell. The ash became damp, soft enough to record every footprint, firm enough to hold its shape. Across that fresh surface, several early hominins quietly walked. They didn't know they were making history. They were simply crossing the landscape. A few more hours, a little more volcanic ash, and the footprints disappeared beneath another protective layer. There they remained, hidden beneath the earth for nearly 3.5 million years. The discovery came almost by accident. In 1978, a team led by British archaeologist Mary Leakey was exploring the region when researchers noticed unusual impressions preserved within exposed volcanic deposits. At first, they appeared to be ordinary animal tracks. But as more ash was carefully uncovered, something remarkable began to appear. Human-like footprints, one after another, stretching across the ancient surface exactly as they had been left millions of years earlier. The excavation became one of the most exciting moments in modern archaeology. Every footprint was carefully cleaned, measured, photographed, protected. The trail extended for more than 20 meters. Researchers could clearly see heels striking the ground first, then the arch. Finally, the toes pushing forward. The walking pattern looked astonishingly familiar. It resembled the way people walk today. The footprints are believed to have been made by Australopithecus afarensis, the same early human species made famous by the fossil known as Lucy. Although their brains were much smaller than ours, these ancient relatives already walked upright on two legs. That discovery changed how scientists understood early human evolution. For years, researchers believed large brains developed before efficient upright walking. The footprints suggested the opposite. Our ancestors were already walking much like modern humans long before our brains reached their present size. Even more fascinating is what the footprints reveal about the individuals themselves. Scientists believe at least 3 hominins crossed the ash together, perhaps 2 adults and a younger companion. Some researchers suggest they may have been walking side by side. Others think one individual deliberately stepped into the footprints of another. Without written records, no one can know exactly what happened that day. Yet the scene feels surprisingly familiar. Imagine standing on that ancient plain. The volcano has fallen silent. The air smells of fresh ash. In the distance, animals cautiously return to the landscape. A small group begins walking across the soft ground. They leave no words, no buildings, no monuments. Only footprints, simple impressions that will quietly outlast entire civilizations. Today, the Laetoli footprints remain among the most important discoveries ever made about our distant past. Not because they belonged to kings, not because they marked a great battle, but because they captured an ordinary moment that became extraordinary through time. One walk across a quiet landscape, one layer of volcanic ash. And millions of years later, those ancient footsteps still remind us that before history was written, before cities rose, before monuments filled the horizon, someone was already walking the same earth we call home today. The giant stone that refuses to fall. What if I told you there is a giant boulder that has balanced on the same tiny point for more than 1,000 years? It weighs nearly 250 tons. It sits on a smooth granite slope. It appears ready to roll away at any moment. Yet no earthquake, no monsoon, no passing century has ever managed to move it. Even today, visitors stand beneath it asking the very same question. Why hasn't it fallen? This remarkable stone is known as Krishna's butterball, one of India's most famous geological mysteries. It rests in the ancient coastal town of Mahabalipuram in southern India, where temples carved from solid granite overlook the Bay of Bengal. The landscape is unlike almost anywhere else. Massive rock formations rise naturally from the earth. Ancient temples appear to grow directly from the stone itself. Palm trees sway in the ocean breeze while waves crash against the nearby shoreline. For more than 1,000 years, this remarkable place has attracted travelers, pilgrims, and curious visitors from around the world. Among all its monuments, however, one feature draws almost everyone's attention first. A single, enormous boulder, perfectly rounded, resting on an impossibly small section of rock. From some angles, it looks as though a gentle push should send it rolling down the hill. Yet countless generations have watched it remain exactly where it is. Local tradition gives the stone its unusual name. According to Hindu mythology, the young Lord Krishna was famous for stealing butter as a child. The rounded boulder reminded local people of a giant ball of butter dropped from the heavens, eventually becoming known as Krishna's butterball. Whether legend or simple imagination, the name has remained for centuries. Its true origin, however, is geological. Scientists believe the boulder formed naturally as the surrounding granite slowly weathered away over millions of years. Wind, rain, changing temperatures, and erosion gradually shaped the enormous rock into its rounded form. Eventually, only the giant boulder remained balanced upon the sloping granite beneath it. Yet understanding how it formed does not completely solve the mystery. The real question is why it continues to stay there. The slope beneath the stone appears surprisingly steep. Visitors often expect it to roll at any moment. Some carefully place their hands against its surface, curious to feel whether it moves. It never does. Despite weighing hundreds of tons, the boulder remains remarkably stable. Its center of gravity rests in exactly the right position to prevent it from tipping forward. It is one of those rare moments where nature creates something that seems to defy common sense. The stone has survived everything the region could throw at it. Powerful tropical storms, centuries of monsoon rains, intense summer heat, even earthquakes that have shaken parts of southern India. Still, Krishna's butterball has never left its perch. Perhaps the most famous attempt to move it came during the early 20th century. According to local accounts, a British governor became concerned that the enormous boulder might someday roll downhill and threaten nearby people. He reportedly ordered the stone to be removed. 7 elephants were brought to the site. Ropes were secured around the giant rock. The animals pulled with all their strength. The boulder never moved. Whether every detail of the story is perfectly accurate has been debated by historians, but the tale has become part of the legend surrounding the stone itself. Imagine standing here 1,000 years ago. Temple builders carve intricate sculptures into the surrounding granite. Pilgrims walk toward the sacred shrines. Children stop to stare at the enormous balancing rock towering above them. The questions they ask are probably the very same ones visitors ask today. How can something so heavy remain so perfectly balanced? Will it ever fall? Or has it simply found the one position where gravity itself keeps it safely in place? Today, engineers explain the mystery through geology, weight distribution, and the precise balance of the stone's center of gravity. No hidden supports exist beneath it. No ancient builders carefully positioned the boulder. Nature accomplished the remarkable balancing act entirely on its own. Yet knowing the science does little to diminish the wonder of seeing it in person. Perhaps that is why Krishna's butterball continues to fascinate millions of visitors every year. Not because it was carved by an ancient civilization, not because it hides forgotten treasure, but because it reminds us that sometimes the most extraordinary monuments are not built by human hands at all. A single giant stone, balanced against every expectation, watching over the temples of Mahabalipuram for centuries, and quietly proving that nature can sometimes create mysteries every bit as remarkable as the greatest achievements of the ancient world. The stone warriors that have guarded a pyramid for 1,000 years. What if I told you there are 4 ancient warriors who have stood watching over a pyramid for nearly 1,000 years, never moving, never speaking, yet still standing exactly where they were placed by a forgotten civilization? They carry weapons, wear elaborate headdresses, their eyes stare toward the distant horizon, and together, they have become one of the most recognizable symbols of the ancient Toltec world. Who were these silent guardians? Real soldiers, legendary heroes, or representations of something even greater? Today, they are known as the Atlantes of Tula, 4 colossal stone warrior columns rising above the ruins of one of ancient Mexico's most remarkable cities. The site lies in central Mexico, north of modern-day Mexico City, where broad valleys stretch toward distant mountains beneath wide blue skies. Today, the landscape is peaceful. Cactus grows among the ancient stones. Warm winds sweep across the plateau. Birds circle above the old temples. At first glance, the ruins appear quiet. But nearly 1,000 years ago, this hilltop was the heart of a powerful civilization. The city was called Tallinn, known today as Tula. For the Toltec people, it became a center of religion, trade, art, and military power. Long before the rise of the Aztec Empire, pilgrims and merchants traveled here from distant regions of Mesoamerica. Many centuries later, the Aztecs looked back upon Tula with enormous respect. They believed it had been the home of wise rulers, skilled craftsmen, and legendary warriors whose achievements had shaped the world before them. At the highest point of the city stood one of its most important temples. Climbing the stone pyramid today is like stepping back through time. The staircase rises toward an open platform overlooking the ancient city, and waiting at the summit are 4 towering stone figures. Each stands more than 4.5 meters tall. Each was carved from massive blocks of basalt. Together, they weigh several tons. Even after centuries of wind, rain, and earthquakes, they remain among the finest examples of monumental sculpture ever created in ancient Mexico. The figures are remarkable for their detail. Each warrior wears a feathered headdress, a decorated chest plate, arm guards, and sandals carefully carved into the stone. Across their backs rest long spear throwers known as atlatls, powerful hunting and military weapons used throughout Mesoamerica. They also carried darts and ceremonial blades. Every carving reflects extraordinary craftsmanship. Nothing about these statues appears hurried. Every line was carefully planned. For many years, archaeologists believed the figures served as guardians watching over the temple below. Later studies revealed an even more remarkable purpose. The warriors were not simply statues. They were enormous columns. Heavy wooden beams once rested across their shoulders, helping support the roof of the temple that stood behind them. The warriors literally carried part of the building itself. It was an elegant combination of architecture and sculpture. Imagine standing here nearly 1,000 years ago. Brightly painted temples surround the plaza. Priests climb the pyramid carrying offerings. The sound of drums echoes across the city. Smoke rises from ceremonial fires. At the summit, 4 brightly colored warriors stand beneath a wooden roof, their painted faces shining beneath the Mexican sun. The city below is alive with merchants, craftsmen, and pilgrims arriving from every direction. It would have been one of the most impressive sights in ancient North America. Exactly who the warriors represent remains uncertain. Some historians believe they depict elite Toltec soldiers. Others suggest they represent divine guardians connected to the feathered serpent deity known as Quetzalcoatl. A few believe they symbolize the ideal warrior, strong, disciplined, and devoted to protecting both the city and its sacred traditions. Without written records from the Toltec themselves, their true meaning has been lost to time. Eventually, Tula entered a period of decline. Political struggles weakened the city. Trade routes shifted. Its population slowly disappeared. The great temples collapsed. Wooden roofs decayed. Stone walls crumbled beneath centuries of neglect. Yet the 4 warriors refused to fall. They continued standing high above the ruins while the civilization that carved them slowly faded into history. When archaeologists began excavating Tula during the 20th century, the giant figures once again emerged from beneath the soil. Piece by piece, they were carefully studied and restored. Today they stand once more upon the pyramid, allowing visitors to experience one of the ancient world's most extraordinary monuments almost exactly as its builders intended. Perhaps that is why the Atlantes of Tula continue to fascinate archaeologists today. Not because they hide buried treasure, not because they belong to an unsolved legend, but because they remind us that even after kingdoms disappear and cities fall silent, great works of human craftsmanship can continue watching over history for centuries. 4 silent warriors. 1 forgotten civilization, a temple carried upon their shoulders, and a timeless reminder that some guardians never truly leave their post. The giant serpent carved into the earth. What if I told you one of the largest ancient carvings in the world cannot truly be seen while standing beside it? From the ground, it looks like little more than a long grassy hill. Nothing seems unusual. No towering temple, no giant stone monument, no carved statues. But high above the landscape, an enormous shape suddenly appears. A serpent, more than 400 meters long. Its body twists across the ridge. Its tail coils into a perfect spiral. And at its mouth rests a mysterious oval shape that has puzzled archaeologists for generations. Who created it? Why build something so enormous that almost no one could fully appreciate from the ground? And what exactly was the serpent meant to represent? Known today as the Serpent Mound, it remains one of North America's greatest archaeological mysteries. The monument lies in southern Ohio, resting atop a narrow ridge that overlooks forests, rivers, and gentle rolling hills. Today, the landscape is peaceful. Birds glide above the trees. Wildflowers cover the slopes during spring. Visitors quietly walk along pathways that follow the ancient earthwork. From ground level, however, the monument is surprisingly difficult to understand. Only from above does its remarkable design become clear. Stretching for more than 400 meters, the serpent winds gracefully across the hilltop. Its body bends through a series of elegant curves before ending in a tightly coiled tail. At the opposite end, the serpent's open mouth appears to swallow, or perhaps release, a large oval mound. That unusual feature has inspired debate for more than a century. Some researchers believe the oval represents an egg. Others suggest it symbolizes the sun. A few have proposed that it depicts the serpent swallowing its prey. Without written records from the builders themselves, no explanation can be confirmed. For many years, archaeologists debated who actually built the monument. Early researchers believed it belonged to the ancient Adena culture more than 2,000 years ago. More recent radiocarbon dating has suggested that at least much of the earthwork may have been constructed around the 11th century by people associated with the fort ancient culture. The discussion continues today, reminding us that archaeology often evolves as new evidence emerges. Regardless of exactly who built it, the achievement remains extraordinary. Unlike stone monuments, the Serpent Mound was created entirely from earth. Its builders carefully shaped thousands of tons of soil, clay, and stone into the giant winding figure. There are no massive blocks, no carved pillars, no mortar, only patient hands slowly transforming the landscape itself into a work of monumental art. Imagine standing here while construction was underway. Groups of workers climb the ridge, carrying woven baskets filled with soil. Others carefully shape each curve using wooden tools and careful measurements. The serpent slowly grows across the hill, not in days or weeks, but perhaps over many seasons. Every curve is planned, every bend carefully positioned. Little by little, an enormous figure begins emerging from the landscape. One of the monument's most fascinating features is its possible connection to the sky. Several sections appear to align with important solar events, including the summer solstice sunset and the winter solstice sunrise. Some researchers have also suggested relationships with the movements of the moon. Whether these alignments were intentional remains debated, but many ancient cultures carefully observed the heavens, making such possibilities difficult to dismiss entirely. The location itself may also have held special meaning. The mound sits upon the rim of an ancient impact crater formed hundreds of millions of years ago when a meteor struck the region. Although the builders could never have known the crater's true origin, they may have recognized the unusual landscape as a place of spiritual importance long before modern geology explained its formation. For centuries, the giant serpent remained hidden in plain sight. Trees covered parts of the ridge. Grass slowly grew across its body. Many early settlers walked nearby without realizing they were standing beside one of North America's greatest prehistoric monuments. Only careful surveys eventually revealed its full shape once again. Today, archaeologists continue studying the Serpent Mound using aerial photography, laser scanning, and modern surveying technology. Each new investigation reveals additional details about its construction while raising new questions about its purpose. Was it a ceremonial site? A symbol of creation? A calendar marked upon the land? Or something entirely different? No one knows for certain. Perhaps that uncertainty is exactly what makes the monument so fascinating. It was never built to impress with towering walls or glittering treasure. Its power comes from its scale, its simplicity, and the realization that thousands of years ago, people reshaped an entire hillside into the image of a serpent that still watches over the Ohio countryside today. A giant earthwork, a forgotten civilization, a serpent stretching across the landscape, and one of humanity's most remarkable reminders that some of the greatest monuments are not built upward, but carved directly into the earth itself. VidIQ. The perfect circles that no one planted. What if I told you there are millions of perfectly round circles covering an African desert, and no one can fully agree on how they formed? From the ground, they seem almost ordinary. Patches of bare earth surrounded by dry grass. But from the sky, the landscape transforms into something extraordinary. Thousands upon thousands of circles, almost perfectly shaped, stretching across the desert for hundreds of kilometers. It looks less like nature, and more like a giant pattern carefully drawn across the earth. For decades, scientists have searched for an explanation. Yet even today, the mystery continues. These remarkable formations are known as the fairy circles of Namibia, one of the strangest natural landscapes ever discovered. They appear across the Namib Desert, one of the oldest and driest deserts on Earth. The region is unlike almost anywhere else. Towering sand dunes glow orange beneath the morning sun. Dry grasslands stretch toward distant mountains. Rain is rare. Life survives only through remarkable adaptations developed over thousands of years. At first glance, the land appears almost empty, but looking closer reveals an astonishing pattern. Perfect circles, some only a few meters across, others nearly 20 meters wide, each surrounded by a ring of healthy grass, each separated from its neighbors by almost equal distances. Together, they create one of the most unusual natural patterns ever seen. For generations, the local Himba people developed their own explanation. According to traditional stories, The circles were left behind by spirits walking across the land. Some believed they marked the footprints of the gods. Others called them the breath of a great dragon sleeping beneath the desert. Long before scientists arrived, the circles had already become part of local legend. Modern researchers first began studying them seriously during the 20th century. At first, many believed the explanation would be simple. Perhaps unusual soil. Perhaps underground gas. Perhaps hidden water sources. But each new investigation produced more questions than answers. One popular theory focused on termites. Researchers discovered that colonies of sand termites often lived beneath many of the circles. According to this idea, the insects consumed vegetation around their nests, creating the bare patches visible today. By removing plants directly above their colonies, they may have helped trap precious moisture beneath the soil, improving survival during long periods without rain. For many scientists, it seemed like a convincing explanation. Then another theory appeared. Some ecologists argued the circles could form naturally without insects at all. In the harsh desert environment, grasses compete fiercely for every drop of water. Over time, mathematical models suggested this competition alone might organize plants into evenly spaced circular patterns. In other words, the landscape could be arranging itself, without any master builder, without any hidden force, simply through the natural struggle for survival. The surprising part is that both ideas appear to explain part of the mystery. Some studies strongly support termite activity. Others provide evidence for self-organizing vegetation. A growing number of researchers now believe both processes may work together, creating the remarkable patterns seen across the desert today. Imagine flying above the Namib Desert at sunrise. The first light spreads across endless dunes. Then the circles begin appearing. Hundreds, thousands, then countless more stretching beyond the horizon. Each one almost perfectly round. Each one separated from the next as though someone carefully planned their position. From above, the desert looks less like wilderness and more like an enormous work of natural geometry. What makes the circles even more remarkable is that they are not permanent. Some survive for decades. Others slowly disappear. New circles eventually form nearby. The desert is constantly changing, quietly creating and erasing its own mysterious artwork over generations. Today, drones, satellite imagery, and advanced computer models allow scientists to study the fairy circles in greater detail than ever before. Researchers continue measuring their spacing, monitoring vegetation growth, and tracking changes through time. Each new discovery brings us closer to understanding one of nature's most beautiful puzzles, yet complete agreement has still not been reached. Perhaps that is why the fairy circles of Namibia continue to fascinate both scientists and travelers alike. Not because they were built by an ancient civilization, not because they hide buried treasure, but because they remind us that even in the modern world, our planet is still capable of creating landscapes so unusual that they seem almost impossible. Millions of perfect circles, one ancient desert, a mystery written across the sand, and a reminder that sometimes nature itself can create wonders every bit as extraordinary as anything built by human hands. vidIQ, the fortress that was melted by fire. What if I told you there is an ancient fortress in Scotland where the stones appear to have melted? Not cracked, not weathered, not broken apart by time, but fused together, as though the walls had been exposed to an enormous furnace. Even today, visitors can see rocks that look almost like glass. Their surfaces have melted and hardened again, locking individual stones into solid masses. The question is simple. How could an Iron Age hill fort generate temperatures hot enough to melt rock? And perhaps even more importantly, why would anyone try? High above the rolling countryside of northeastern Scotland stands the hill of Tappanoth, one of the highest points in the region. From its summit, the view stretches for miles. Green valleys spread below. Small rivers wind through the landscape. On clear days, distant mountains rise against the horizon. It is easy to understand why ancient people chose this place. Anyone standing here could see approaching visitors long before they reached the hill. It was the perfect natural fortress. Long before castles appeared across Scotland, people built powerful hill forts on high ground like this. Stone walls surrounded the summit. Wooden gates controlled the entrance. Homes stood safely inside the defenses. Communities lived here, watching over the surrounding valleys for generations. But Tappanoth is remembered for something far stranger than its location: the stones themselves. When archaeologists first examined parts of the ancient wall, they noticed something unusual. Many rocks had fused together. Instead of lying as separate stones, they had become bonded by melted material that cooled into a glass-like surface. The process is known as vitrification. It happens only when rock is heated to extremely high temperatures, far hotter than an ordinary campfire, far hotter than most accidental fires. Generating that kind of heat across an entire defensive wall would have required an enormous amount of fuel, thousands of pieces of timber, hours of intense burning, and careful conditions capable of producing temperatures exceeding 1,000 degrees Celsius. That immediately raises an extraordinary question. Was the wall destroyed by enemies or deliberately set on fire by its own builders? For more than a century, archaeologists have debated exactly that. One theory suggests invading armies burned the fortress during an attack. The intense flames weakened the stone defenses, causing sections of the wall to collapse. If enough timber had been built into the structure, the resulting fire might have become hot enough to partially melt the surrounding rock. It is a dramatic explanation. One final battle. One devastating blaze. A fortress consumed by flames. Another possibility is even more surprising. Some researchers believe the vitrification may have been intentional. Perhaps ancient builders discovered that heating the walls under controlled conditions could strengthen them by fusing the outer stones together. If true, it would represent an extraordinary engineering experiment carried out more than 2,000 years ago. The difficulty is that modern experiments have produced mixed results. Some successfully recreated vitrified stone. Others found the process too unpredictable and too costly to serve as a practical building method. The debate continues. Tapa Nuth itself has become even more fascinating in recent years. Archaeological surveys revealed the remains of hundreds of small stone buildings spread across the hillside surrounding the summit. Far more than anyone expected. The discovery suggests this was not simply a lonely fortress occupied by a few warriors. Instead, it may have overlooked a surprisingly large settlement filled with families, craftsmen, traders, and farmers. Imagine climbing the hill during its busiest years. Smoke rises from dozens of round houses. Children run between stone walls. Shepherds guide livestock across the slopes below. Warriors watch the valleys from the summit while fires burn inside the settlement as evening approaches. Then, one day, something changes. Flames race through the defensive walls. The fire grows hotter and hotter. Timbers collapse. Stone begins glowing in the darkness. As the blaze finally dies away, parts of the fortress have transformed forever. The rocks themselves have changed. Centuries pass. The people leave. The houses slowly collapse beneath the Scottish weather. Grass covers the old pathways. Only the strange melted stones remain, silently preserving evidence of an event no one alive witnessed. Today, archaeologists continue studying Tapa Nuth using excavation, drone surveys, and modern scientific analysis. Every season uncovers new clues about the settlement and the mysterious vitrified walls. Yet no single explanation has answered every question. Perhaps that is why the fortress continues to capture the imagination. Not because it hides buried treasure, not because legends speak of forgotten kings, but because it preserves physical evidence of something extraordinary. An ancient hill fort where fire became so intense that solid stone itself began to melt. A lonely hill, a vanished community, walls transformed by unimaginable heat, and one of Scotland's greatest archaeological mysteries, still waiting for its final explanation. The lost city hidden beneath the Amazon. What if I told you one of the greatest lost cities in history wasn't hidden beneath the desert, or buried beneath the sea, but swallowed by the world's largest rainforest? For centuries, explorers believed the Amazon had always been an untouched wilderness, a place too dense, too wet, too unforgiving to support large civilizations. The jungle seemed to tell the same story. Towering trees, endless rivers, an ocean of green stretching beyond the horizon. Yet beneath those forests, hidden under vines, roots, and centuries of soil, archaeologists began finding something completely unexpected. Roads, earthworks, ancient villages, defensive walls, and the remains of a forgotten city so large that it challenged everything historians thought they knew about the Amazon. This mysterious place is known as Kuhikugu, one of the most remarkable archaeological discoveries ever made in the Brazilian rainforest. Deep within the Xingu region of the southern Amazon, surrounded by dense forest and winding rivers, the ruins remained hidden for centuries. Unlike the towering pyramids of Egypt or the stone temples of Peru, Kuhikugu left almost no monuments rising above the trees. The jungle reclaimed everything. Wood decayed. Thatched roofs disappeared. The forest quietly erased nearly every visible trace of the people who once lived there. To anyone passing overhead, it simply looked like untouched wilderness. But appearances can be deceiving. The first clues came from unusual shapes noticed on the forest floor. Perfect circles, straight embankments, large ditches forming geometric patterns that nature rarely creates on its own. As archaeologists continued investigating, those isolated discoveries slowly connected into something much larger. Entire settlements emerged from beneath the vegetation. Wide roads linked neighboring communities. Artificial ponds stored water. Bridges crossed wetlands. Fields had once been carefully managed for agriculture. This was not a handful of isolated villages. It was a carefully planned landscape. Researchers now believe Kuhikugu was part of a network of interconnected towns that flourished between roughly the 9th and 16th centuries. Some estimates suggest tens of thousands of people may have lived throughout the surrounding region. If true, it would make this one of the largest pre-Columbian population centers ever discovered in the Amazon. That idea surprised many historians. For generations, scholars believed the rainforest's poor soils could never support large populations. The discovery of Kuhikugu forced researchers to reconsider that assumption. The people who lived here were remarkably skilled at shaping their environment. Rather than clearing the forest completely, they learned how to work with it. One of their greatest achievements involved creating what is now called terra preta, or dark earth. This unusually fertile soil contains charcoal, organic waste, and other materials intentionally added by ancient communities. Even today, centuries after the city disappeared, these dark soils remain far richer than the surrounding ground. Modern farmers still value them for their remarkable fertility. Imagine arriving here 600 years ago. Instead of endless, untouched jungle, you would find broad roads leading toward bustling settlements. Smoke rises from hundreds of homes. Children play beside artificial lakes. Farmers harvest crops from carefully managed fields. Large wooden buildings stand within circular plazas where ceremonies and gatherings take place. Canoes glide along nearby rivers carrying food, pottery, and visitors between neighboring communities. The forest is still everywhere, but it is a forest carefully managed by human hands. Perhaps the most fascinating part of Kuhikugu is what happened next. Sometime during the 16th century, European diseases began spreading across South America. Even communities that had never directly met European explorers were devastated. Smallpox, measles, influenza. Entire populations disappeared within only a few generations. Many archaeologists believe disease played a major role in the abandonment of Kuhikugu. As people died or left the settlements, nature slowly reclaimed everything. Trees rooted themselves inside abandoned roads. Vines climbed over old earthworks. The rainforest quietly erased a civilization from view. For centuries afterward, travelers dismissed stories of great Amazonian cities as myths. One of the most famous legends spoke of a lost city hidden somewhere in the jungle, a place Europeans called the City of Z. British explorer Percy Fawcett became obsessed with finding it during the early 20th century. He disappeared into the Amazon in 1925 and was never seen again. Although Kuhikugu may not have been the exact city Fawcett imagined, discoveries like this suggest that the old stories of large Amazonian civilizations were not as impossible as many once believed. Today, archaeologists use satellite imagery, drones, and airborne laser scanning known as LIDAR to see beneath the forest canopy without cutting down a single tree. These technologies continue revealing new roads, villages, and ceremonial sites hidden beneath the Amazon. Each discovery adds another piece to a forgotten chapter of human history. Perhaps that is why Kuhikugu remains one of archaeology's most extraordinary discoveries. Not because it contains giant pyramids, not because it is filled with glittering treasure, but because it reminds us that history can disappear without leaving obvious traces. An entire civilization can be swallowed by the forest, its cities erased, its people forgotten, until one day, centuries later, the jungle finally begins to reveal the secrets it has been protecting all along. The pyramid that looks like it was never finished. What if I told you there is an Egyptian pyramid that appears to have collapsed before it was ever completed? A pyramid with hidden chambers, long abandoned passageways, and a mystery that archaeologists are still trying to understand more than 4,000 years later? Unlike the Great Pyramid of Giza, This monument doesn't rise proudly above the desert with perfectly smooth sides. Instead, it looks broken, uneven, almost unfinished. Some people believe it was an engineering disaster. Others think it was abandoned halfway through construction. But the truth may be even more fascinating. Standing alone on the edge of Egypt's desert is the Meidum Pyramid, one of the oldest pyramids ever built. At first glance, it hardly resembles a pyramid at all. Only a tall stone core rises above an enormous mound of rubble. From a distance, it almost looks like a giant medieval tower surrounded by collapsed walls. For centuries, travelers wondered whether they were looking at the remains of a ruined pyramid, or something entirely different. The Meidum Pyramid was built during one of the most important periods in Egyptian history. It is generally believed that construction began under Pharaoh Huni, the last ruler of Egypt's third dynasty, before being completed, or perhaps extensively modified, during the reign of his successor, Pharaoh Sneferu. Sneferu would later become one of history's greatest pyramid builders. He commissioned several enormous pyramids that transformed Egyptian architecture forever. The Meidum Pyramid appears to have been one of his earliest and most ambitious experiments. Originally, the structure may have begun as a traditional step pyramid, similar to the famous Pyramid of Djoser at Saqqara. Later, builders attempted something revolutionary. They filled the steps with additional limestone, creating smooth outer faces and transforming the monument into one of Egypt's first true pyramids. It was a bold idea, one that would eventually lead to the construction of the magnificent pyramids at Dahshur and Giza. But something went terribly wrong. At some point in antiquity, most of the pyramid's outer layers collapsed. Thousands upon thousands of limestone blocks crashed into the surrounding desert. Today, that enormous ring of rubble still lies where it fell, surrounding the central tower like the remains of a forgotten mountain. Exactly when the collapse occurred remains one of archaeology's enduring mysteries. Some historians once believed the pyramid failed during construction because its steep angle and unstable foundation could not support the weight of the outer casing. Others argue that it stood intact for centuries before stones were gradually removed or weakened by earthquakes, weather, and human activity. The debate continues, yet the greatest secrets of Meidum are not found outside, but within. Hidden inside the pyramid is a network of ancient chambers and narrow passageways that still survive after more than 4,000 years. Visitors descend through a long, sloping corridor cut deep into the stone. The air becomes noticeably cooler. Sunlight slowly disappears behind them. Only silence remains. The corridor eventually leads into a series of chambers built with remarkable precision. Massive limestone blocks fit tightly together. The walls are simple, almost undecorated. Unlike the richly painted tombs built many centuries later, these rooms were never intended to impress visitors. They served a far more sacred purpose. Deep within the pyramid lies the burial chamber itself. Its ceiling rises high above the floor using a remarkable technique known as corbelled construction. Each layer of stone extends slightly inward until the walls finally meet overhead. This design helped distribute the tremendous weight pressing down from the pyramid above. It was an early engineering solution that influenced many later Egyptian monuments. Curiously, no royal burial has ever been discovered inside. No mummy, no golden treasures, no magnificent sarcophagus. If Pharaoh Sneferu or Huni was ever placed here, every trace has long since disappeared. Whether ancient tomb robbers emptied the chamber or the burial never occurred at all remains unknown. Imagine entering the pyramid shortly after its completion. The polished white limestone casing reflects the Egyptian sun so brightly that the monument can be seen for miles across the Nile Valley. Priests slowly descend through the entrance carrying ceremonial offerings. Torches flicker against the smooth stone walls. The burial chamber stands silent, waiting in darkness beneath millions of carefully placed blocks. Outside, workers admire one of the most ambitious structures ever attempted by human hands. They cannot know that thousands of years later, only its central core will remain standing. The Meidum Pyramid occupies a unique place in Egyptian history. It represents a turning point, a moment when builders were learning through experimentation. Some ideas succeeded brilliantly. Others revealed unexpected weaknesses. Without monuments like Meidum, later masterpieces such as the Bent Pyramid, the Red Pyramid, and eventually the Great Pyramid of Giza might never have been possible. Today, archaeologists continue studying the monument using modern surveying techniques, laser scanning, and structural analysis. Every new investigation offers fresh clues about how the pyramid was built, why its outer layers disappeared, and what role it played during the earliest age of pyramid construction. Yet many questions remain unanswered. Perhaps that is why the Maiden Pyramid continues to fascinate historians. Not because it is Egypt's largest pyramid, not because it contains magnificent treasure, but because it preserves the story of one of humanity's greatest architectural experiments. A monument that changed the course of history, even if history never allowed it to remain complete. A lonely pyramid, hidden chambers beneath the desert, and a reminder that even the greatest civilizations learned through trial, failure, and remarkable determination. The Viking village that changed the story of America. What if I told you Europeans reached North America nearly 500 years before Christopher Columbus? Not as a legend, not as a myth passed down through old stories, but as a real settlement, built with wooden houses, iron workshops, and families who crossed one of the most dangerous oceans on Earth. For centuries, historians believed such stories belonged only to the Viking sagas, exciting tales filled with impossible voyages and distant lands. But hidden along the windswept coast of Newfoundland, archaeologists uncovered something that changed history forever: a real Viking settlement, the first confirmed European community ever discovered in North America. Its name is L'Anse aux Meadows, and it remains one of the most extraordinary archaeological discoveries of the 20th century. The site lies on the northern tip of Newfoundland, Canada, where the Atlantic Ocean crashes endlessly against rocky shores. The landscape feels wild and untamed. Cold winds sweep across open grasslands. Fog rolls in from the sea without warning. The coastline is scattered with small coves, low hills, and endless stretches of water reaching toward Greenland and Iceland far beyond the horizon. Even today, it feels like the edge of the known world. Nearly 1,000 years ago, however, this remote coastline became the destination of one of history's greatest voyages. The Vikings were already among the finest sailors the world had ever seen. Their longships crossed rough northern seas that many other civilizations feared to enter. From Scandinavia, they settled Iceland, then Greenland. Eventually, according to Old Norse stories, they reached an unknown land they called Vinland. For hundreds of years, many scholars doubted the stories. Some believed the sagas exaggerated real events. Others thought Vinland existed only in legend. There was simply no physical evidence. Then everything changed. In the early 1960s, Norwegian explorer Helge Ingstad and archaeologist Anne Steiningstad arrived on the coast of Newfoundland after listening carefully to stories shared by local residents. People spoke of strange grassy mounds unlike anything else in the area. To most visitors, they looked like ordinary hills, but experienced archaeologists noticed something unusual. The shapes were too regular, too deliberate. Excavations soon began. As layers of earth were carefully removed, the outlines of ancient buildings slowly appeared. Walls made from thick turf, wooden structures, fireplaces, workshops. The remains of an entire Norse settlement hidden beneath the grass for almost 1,000 years. The discovery stunned historians around the world. Among the most remarkable finds was a small iron-working furnace. This single feature carried enormous importance. The indigenous peoples living in the region at that time did not produce iron in this way. The furnace clearly pointed toward visitors from across the Atlantic. Additional discoveries strengthened the evidence. Iron nails used in Viking ships, a spindle whorl for spinning wool, bronze objects, woodworking tools. Every artifact told the same story. This was not simply a place where Vikings briefly landed. They had built homes here, worked here, lived here. The settlement itself was surprisingly modest. Only a handful of buildings stood together. Large, timber-framed halls covered with thick layers of turf provided insulation against the harsh northern winters. Smaller workshops surrounded them. One building appears to have been used for repairing ships, another for blacksmithing. Together, they formed a small frontier community on the very edge of the Viking world. Imagine arriving here around the year 1000. A longship appears through the morning fog. Its striped sail slowly lowers as it enters the sheltered bay. Crew members jump into the shallow water and pull the vessel onto the rocky shore. Axes echo through the forest as trees are cut for building. Smoke begins rising from newly built homes. Children explore unfamiliar forests while hunters search for food along the coastline. For the first time in history, Europeans are living in North America. Yet life here was never easy. The climate was harsh. Winters were long. Supplies from Greenland were uncertain. Relations with the indigenous peoples, whom the Norse sagas called the Skraelings, may have become increasingly difficult. Over time, maintaining such a distant settlement became nearly impossible. Eventually, the Vikings left. Their buildings slowly collapsed. Grass covered the roofs. The wind erased nearly every trace of their presence. For almost 1,000 years, the settlement disappeared beneath the landscape. When archaeologists finally uncovered it again, history itself had to be rewritten. Christopher Columbus had not been the first European to reach North America. The Vikings had crossed the Atlantic nearly 5 centuries earlier. Today, L'Anse aux Meadows is recognized as a UNESCO World Heritage Site and remains one of the most important archaeological discoveries ever made. Researchers continue studying the settlement using advanced dating techniques, environmental analysis, and archaeological excavation. Each new discovery reveals a little more about how these remarkable sailors survived at the very edge of the known world. Perhaps that is why L'Anse aux Meadows continues to fascinate historians today. Not because it was a great city, not because it contained unimaginable treasure, but because it quietly proved that history is never truly finished. Sometimes, a few forgotten houses beneath a grassy field are enough to change everything we thought we knew. A lonely settlement, a handful of Viking homes, a journey across an impossible ocean, and one extraordinary discovery that rewrote the history of an entire continent, vidIQ, the people who were said to fear the sun. What if I told you one of North America's strangest forgotten stories speaks of an entire people who could barely see in daylight? According to old traditions, they lived inside stone fortresses, built mysterious underground chambers, and vanished long before written history reached the Appalachian Mountains. The Cherokee gave them a remarkable name, the Moon-Eyed People. No one knows exactly who they were. Some believe they were simply a legend. Others think the stories preserve the distant memory of a forgotten culture that once lived in the mountains of the southeastern United States. Whatever the truth may be, the mystery has endured for centuries. The legend is closely connected to the hills and valleys of present-day Georgia, Tennessee, and North Carolina. These mountains are filled with ancient rivers, caves, and forests that have sheltered people for thousands of years. Long before European settlers arrived, the Cherokee called this landscape home. Their traditions were passed from one generation to the next through storytelling rather than written records. Among those stories was one unlike any other. It spoke of a people who were already living in the mountains before the Cherokee arrived. They were described as having unusually light-colored eyes. Some accounts claimed they could see clearly only at night. Bright sunlight supposedly caused them discomfort, forcing them to remain indoors during the day. Whether these descriptions were meant literally or symbolically remains impossible to know. Yet the stories became part of Cherokee oral history. Early European settlers also recorded versions of the legend after hearing it from local communities. Some accounts described the Moon-Eyed People as peaceful builders. Others claimed they defended stone settlements hidden among the hills. A few stories even suggested battles took place before the mysterious people eventually disappeared from the region. No written record from the Moon-Eyed People themselves has ever been found. Everything we know comes from traditions told centuries after the events they may describe. That uncertainty has kept the mystery alive. The legend became even more intriguing when archaeologists began studying ancient stone structures throughout the Appalachian region. One of the most famous is Fort Mountain in northern Georgia. Stretching for nearly 300 meters across a mountain ridge is a remarkable stone wall built from carefully stacked rocks. No mortar holds the stones together. The wall follows the natural contours of the mountain, sometimes reaching several meters in height. Who built it remains uncertain. Archaeologists have proposed several possibilities. Some believe it was constructed by indigenous communities during the Woodland or Mississippian periods. Others argue it may have served as a ceremonial boundary rather than a military fortification. Local folklore, however, connected the wall to the mysterious Moon-Eyed People. Imagine climbing these mountains hundreds of years ago. Morning mist drifts through the valleys. Dense forests cover every hillside. Hidden among the trees stands a long stone wall unlike anything expected in the wilderness. Who placed each stone? Who watched the valleys from its summit? Without written records, the answers disappear into the forest. Over the years, numerous objects have been linked to the Moon-Eyed legend. Stone tools, pottery fragments, ancient earthworks, burial mounds. Yet none have been proven to belong to a separate civilization known as the Moon-Eyed People. Instead, archaeologists generally attribute these discoveries to the many indigenous cultures that flourished throughout the southeastern United States for thousands of years before European contact. That distinction is important. The archaeological evidence clearly demonstrates the presence of sophisticated Native American societies across the region. The Moon-Eyed people themselves, however, remain part of folklore rather than an archaeologically identified culture. Still, the persistence of the story continues to fascinate historians. Legends often preserve fragments of real events. Sometimes they remember migrations, sometimes forgotten conflicts, sometimes encounters between different cultures that later generations no longer fully understood. Could the Moon-Eyed story preserve a distant memory of one such encounter? No one can say with certainty. Imagine an evening in the Appalachian Mountains long ago. The sun disappears behind the ridges. Fires begin glowing inside distant settlements. Elders gather children together and begin telling stories about the people who once lived beyond the forests. Generation after generation listens. The details slowly change. Names are forgotten. Events become legends. But the mystery survives. Today, researchers continue studying the archaeology of the Appalachian region using excavation, radiocarbon dating, LIDAR surveys, and careful analysis of indigenous oral traditions. Each new discovery reveals more about the remarkable civilizations that once flourished among these mountains. Yet the identity of the Moon-Eyed people remains one of North America's most enduring mysteries. Perhaps that is why the story continues to capture the imagination. Not because it proves a forgotten civilization, not because it confirms an ancient legend, but because it reminds us that history is not preserved only in stone walls or buried artifacts. Sometimes it survives through stories carried across countless generations, stories that refuse to disappear. A forgotten people. Ancient mountain walls. Fragments of memory passed through centuries, and one legend that still lingers beneath the forests of the Appalachian Mountains, waiting for someone to uncover the truth behind the tale. The machine that measured time with water. What if I told you one of the world's first precision clocks didn't use gears, or springs, or electricity? It used nothing more than flowing water. Drop, after drop, after drop. For thousands of years, long before mechanical clocks filled church towers or wristwatches measured every second of our lives, ancient civilizations searched for a reliable way to measure time. Among them, few became as sophisticated as the engineers of ancient China. They created remarkable water clocks capable of measuring hours with astonishing accuracy, quietly transforming astronomy, government, and daily life. These remarkable devices became known as Chinese water clocks, and for centuries they ranked among the greatest engineering achievements of the ancient world. The earliest forms appeared more than 2,000 years ago. At first, they were surprisingly simple. A carefully shaped bronze or ceramic vessel held water. A tiny hole near its base allowed the water to escape at a controlled rate. As the water level slowly dropped, markings inside the container indicated the passing of time. Simple, elegant, and remarkably effective. Yet Chinese engineers were not satisfied. Over generations, they transformed these humble vessels into increasingly complex machines. Instead of relying on a single container, they connected several tanks together. Water flowed from one vessel into another, maintaining a more consistent pressure and producing far greater accuracy. Every improvement reduced small errors that accumulated over time. Each generation learned from the last. Imagine standing inside an imperial workshop nearly 1,000 years ago. Bronze craftsmen polish beautifully cast containers. Carpenters carefully shape wooden frames. Engineers watch narrow streams of water flowing between carefully measured vessels. They adjust tiny openings no wider than a grain of rice. Even the smallest change could affect the clock's accuracy. Nothing is rushed. Every drop matters. These remarkable instruments served far more than simple curiosity. Accurate timekeeping became essential throughout ancient China. Government officials organized daily ceremonies according to precise schedules. Temple rituals followed carefully measured hours. Astronomers observed the movement of stars and planets during specific moments of the night. Farmers relied upon seasonal calendars built from generations of careful observation. Without reliable clocks, much of this knowledge would have been far more difficult to maintain. Perhaps the greatest leap came during the Song dynasty. In the 11th century, the brilliant engineer Su Song designed one of the most extraordinary clocks ever constructed. His towering astronomical clock stood several stories high. Inside, flowing water powered an intricate system of gears, rotating celestial globes, and mechanical figures that announced the passing hours. Some historians describe it as one of the world's earliest clock towers. Visitors would have watched doors open automatically as wooden figures appeared to strike bells and beat drums at carefully measured intervals. To people living nearly 1,000 years ago, The machine must have seemed almost magical. Yet behind every moving figure stood careful engineering rather than mystery. The steady flow of water powered an ingenious mechanism known as an escapement, allowing controlled movement rather than continuous spinning. Centuries later, similar ideas would become essential to mechanical clocks throughout Europe. Although historians continue debating exactly how technological knowledge spread between civilizations, there is little doubt that Chinese engineers had achieved remarkable sophistication long before many famous European clock towers appeared. Imagine visiting the imperial capital during the Song dynasty. Crowds gather around the enormous clock tower. Officials consult its readings before important ceremonies. Scholars study the rotating celestial globe above. As sunlight fades into evening, the gentle sound of bells echoes through the city. Another hour has quietly passed. Not through magic, not through guesswork, but through the patient movement of flowing water. The greatest challenge facing every water clock was consistency. Water behaves differently depending on temperature. During cold weather, it flows more slowly. During warmer days, it moves more quickly. Engineers constantly searched for ways to reduce these variations. Some added multiple regulating tanks. Others experimented with carefully shaped outlets. Every improvement brought them one step closer to accurate timekeeping. Archaeologists have discovered bronze vessels, inscriptions, diagrams, and historical texts describing many of these remarkable machines. Although most original wooden components disappeared long ago, surviving records reveal astonishing levels of scientific understanding. They remind us that ancient engineers were not merely builders. They were careful observers of mathematics, astronomy, hydraulics, and mechanics. Today, working reconstructions of Chinese water clocks allow visitors to witness these ancient inventions once again. Watching the water slowly flow through each chamber, it becomes easy to appreciate the extraordinary patience required to create such a machine. No batteries, no electronics, no hidden motors, only gravity, water, and human ingenuity. Perhaps that is why Chinese water clocks continue to fascinate historians today. Not because they were the largest machines of the ancient world, not because they contained hidden treasure, but because they remind us that humanity's desire to understand time is almost as old as civilization itself. Long before ticking clocks filled our homes, long before digital screens counted every second, ancient engineers discovered that even a single drop of water could measure the passage of history. A quiet stream, a remarkable invention, and one of the greatest timekeeping machines ever created by the ancient world. vidIQ, the fire that could burn on water. What if I told you there was once a weapon so terrifying that entire fleets turned and fled at the mere sight of it? A fire that refused to go out. A flame that seemed to grow stronger when it touched the sea. One that sailors believed could not be extinguished with water. For centuries, enemies feared it. Emperors guarded its secret. And despite countless attempts to uncover its formula, no one today knows exactly how it was made. History remembers it by a simple name: Greek fire. Even now, more than 1,000 years later, it remains one of the greatest lost technologies of the ancient world. The story begins in the 7th century, during one of the most dangerous periods in the history of the Byzantine Empire. Constantinople, the empire's magnificent capital, stood at the crossroads of Europe and Asia. Its towering walls overlooked the Bosporus Strait. Merchant ships filled its busy harbors. Golden church domes reflected the morning sun. It was one of the richest and most powerful cities on earth. But it was also surrounded by enemies. Powerful armies marched toward its walls. Enemy fleets appeared across the sea. The empire desperately needed something capable of defending its capital. According to Byzantine historians, that solution arrived through a man named Kallinikos, an engineer believed to have fled from the eastern Mediterranean after the Arab conquests. Bringing with him an extraordinary invention, he presented the emperor with a weapon unlike anything the ancient world had ever seen. It was not simply fire. Civilizations had long used flaming arrows and burning oil during warfare. Greek fire was something entirely different. It could be projected across the water through bronze tubes mounted on the front of Byzantine warships. As the mixture ignited, a roaring stream of flames burst toward enemy vessels. Witnesses described great sheets of fire racing across the sea. Wooden ships caught fire almost instantly. Panic spread through entire fleets. Some sailors leaped into the water, only to discover that the burning substance appeared to float upon the surface around them. To those who faced it, the weapon must have seemed almost supernatural. Imagine standing aboard an enemy ship during one of these battles. The sea is calm. The Byzantine fleet slowly approaches. Suddenly, a strange bronze tube mounted on the bow begins pointing toward your vessel. A deep roar echoes across the water. Then a brilliant stream of blazing liquid erupts into the air. Within seconds, flames spread across the deck. The sails ignite. Smoke fills the sky. Commands disappear beneath the sound of panic. No one aboard has ever seen anything like it. For generations, Greek fire became the empire's greatest military secret. The exact formula was known only to a handful of trusted officials. Its production was carefully controlled. Its ingredients were never recorded in surviving public documents. Some Byzantine writers even claimed revealing the secret was considered an act of treason. That secrecy proved remarkably effective. Although neighboring civilizations attempted to copy the weapon, none succeeded with certainty. The original formula disappeared sometime after the decline of the Byzantine Empire. Today, historians can only speculate about what it contained. Many researchers believe the mixture may have included petroleum or naphtha, substances naturally found in parts of the Middle East. Others suggest sulfur, pine resin, quicklime, or other combustible materials may have been added to increase its effectiveness. Different combinations have been tested in modern experiments. Some produce impressive flames. Others burn upon water for short periods. Yet none can be confirmed as the authentic Byzantine formula. The greatest challenge is that ancient descriptions often contradict one another. Some eyewitnesses describe thick streams of liquid fire. Others compare it to exploding flames. Still, others focus more on the terrifying sound it produced than on its appearance. Like many ancient technologies, part of the truth may have been exaggerated through generations of storytelling. Yet one fact remains beyond dispute. Greek fire changed history. During several major naval battles, particularly the Arab sieges of Constantinople, the weapon played a crucial role in protecting the Byzantine capital. Had those attacks succeeded, the political and cultural history of Europe and the Eastern Mediterranean might have unfolded very differently. Sometimes a single invention can alter the course of civilizations. What makes Greek fire especially fascinating is not simply its destructive power, it is the knowledge behind it. Someone understood chemistry well enough to create a weapon unlike anything seen before. Someone designed bronze siphons capable of projecting burning liquid over considerable distances. Someone developed techniques for storing and transporting an incredibly dangerous substance without accidentally destroying their own ships. These achievements required remarkable engineering. Imagine walking through the imperial workshops hidden behind Constantinople's walls. Large bronze cauldrons stand over carefully controlled fires. Master craftsmen quietly mix ingredients known only to a select few. Guards watch every doorway. Workers speak in hushed voices. Outside, warships wait in the harbor, ready to receive sealed containers whose contents could determine the outcome of an entire battle. No visitor is allowed to learn too much. No written instructions leave the workshop. The secret survives because it is never fully shared. And then, one day, it disappears. Empires rise and fall. Workshops close. The people who once guarded the formula die. Generation by generation, the knowledge slowly fades until only stories remain. Today, Greek fire continues to fascinate historians, chemists, and military engineers alike. Not because anyone believes it possessed magical powers, and not because it broke the laws of nature, but because it reminds us how easily human knowledge can vanish. Entire technologies can disappear when the people who created them leave behind no complete record. Perhaps that is the greatest mystery of all. A weapon that protected an empire, and a secret that history has never been able to recover. The ancient concrete that refused to crumble. What if I told you some of the strongest concrete on Earth wasn't made in the modern age, but more than 2,000 years ago? It holds together ancient harbors, massive temples, aqueducts, and one of the largest domes ever built. While many modern concrete structures begin showing serious damage after only a few decades, some Roman buildings have survived earthquakes, storms, seawater, and centuries of weather, still standing, still functioning, still challenging modern engineers to understand how they were built. The material behind these extraordinary structures is known simply as Roman concrete, and even today, scientists continue studying its remarkable secrets. Travel across Italy, and evidence of it appears almost everywhere. The Pantheon in Rome still carries the world's largest unreinforced concrete dome. Ancient harbors stretch into the Mediterranean after nearly 2,000 years of pounding waves. Bridges continue crossing rivers first spanned during the Roman Empire. Many walls remain standing long after countless newer buildings have disappeared. At first glance, the concrete looks rough, uneven, almost primitive. It lacks the perfectly smooth finish of modern construction, yet appearances can be deceiving. Inside those weathered walls lies one of the greatest engineering achievements of the ancient world. The Romans were extraordinary builders. Their empire stretched across 3 continents, connecting distant provinces through an immense network of roads, aqueducts, ports, temples, baths, and fortresses. To build on such a massive scale, they needed a material that was strong, practical, and capable of lasting for generations. They found the answer in an unusual mixture of volcanic ash, lime, water, and broken pieces of stone. One ingredient proved especially important: a fine volcanic ash known as pozzolana, collected from the region around the Bay of Naples. When mixed with lime and water, this ash created chemical reactions unlike those found in ordinary building materials. The result was concrete that continued changing long after it had hardened. Imagine standing beside a Roman construction site nearly 2,000 years ago. Workers unload baskets filled with volcanic ash. Others carry chunks of limestone and broken rock. The ingredients are mixed inside large wooden troughs before being poured into massive timber molds. Stone by stone, layer by layer, a bridge begins rising across a river. Nearby, another team builds an aqueduct that will one day carry fresh water across valleys and mountains. Nothing about the process appears rushed. Every structure is designed with permanence in mind. One of the greatest advantages of Roman concrete was its versatility. Unlike carefully carved stone blocks that required tremendous labor, concrete could be poured into almost any shape. Architects suddenly gained enormous freedom. Large vaults became possible. Wide arches spanned greater distances. Massive domes reached heights never before imagined. The Pantheon remains perhaps the finest example. Completed nearly 19 centuries ago, its enormous dome still dominates the Roman skyline. Even today, engineers admire its remarkable balance and strength. Yet perhaps the greatest mystery lies beneath the sea. Throughout the Mediterranean, ancient Roman harbors continue resisting waves that have battered them for nearly 2,000 years. Modern seawalls often require major repairs after only a few decades. Roman harbor structures have endured century after century. How? For years, researchers assumed the concrete simply began stronger than modern mixtures. Recent scientific studies suggest something even more remarkable. Rather than weakening over time, Roman marine concrete appears to become stronger as seawater slowly passes through tiny cracks. The saltwater reacts with volcanic minerals inside the concrete, forming new crystals that help strengthen the structure from within. In other words, the material may actually repair itself as it ages. That surprising discovery has attracted scientists from around the world. Researchers hope understanding these ancient chemical processes could help create longer-lasting building materials for the future. Imagine standing along a Roman harbor shortly after its completion. Merchant ships arrive from Egypt, Greece, and North Africa. Heavy cargo is unloaded onto stone quays built from freshly poured concrete. Children run along the waterfront. Fishermen prepare their nets. No one realizes that the harbor beneath their feet will still be standing nearly 2,000 years later. Empires rise. Empires fall. Languages change. Kings disappear. Yet the concrete quietly remains. Of course, Roman builders did not possess modern chemistry laboratories. They had no microscopes, no advanced engineering software. Instead, they relied upon careful observation passed from one generation of craftsmen to the next. They learned which volcanic ash produced the strongest mixtures, which proportions created lasting structures, which building methods survived earthquakes and harsh weather. Their knowledge grew through centuries of experience. Some of it was eventually forgotten. Today, archaeologists, chemists, and engineers continue analyzing tiny samples taken from Roman buildings. Using powerful microscopes and advanced laboratory equipment, they examine minerals no larger than grains of sand. Every new study reveals another clue about why these remarkable structures have endured for so long. Yet complete understanding remains surprisingly elusive. Perhaps that is why Roman concrete continues to fascinate researchers today. Not because it was magical, not because the Romans possessed impossible technology, but because it reminds us that ancient knowledge was often far more sophisticated than we once imagined. Sometimes the greatest inventions are not the ones that disappear, but the ones that quietly survive. A handful of volcanic ash, a remarkable chemical reaction, an empire built to last, and one ancient material that continues teaching the modern world how to build for the future, vidIQ, the iron pillar that refused to rust. What if I told you there is a massive iron pillar that has stood in the open air for more than 1,600 years? Through blazing summers, relentless monsoon rains, dust storms, and changing empires. Yet it has barely rusted at all? Modern bridges made from ordinary iron often begin corroding within years if left exposed to the weather. But this ancient monument has quietly resisted the passage of time, not hidden inside a museum, not protected beneath a roof, but standing beneath the open sky, where millions of people have walked past it for centuries. Even today, scientists continue studying one remarkable question. How did ancient metalworkers create iron that has survived for so long? The monument is known simply as the Iron Pillar of Delhi, and it remains one of the greatest achievements of ancient metallurgy. It stands within the Qutb archaeological complex in India's capital, surrounded by ancient mosques, stone gateways, and towering monuments that span more than 1,000 years of history. Visitors often notice the pillar almost by accident. It is not the tallest structure in the complex. Nearby rises the magnificent Qutb Minar, drawing most eyes toward the sky. But standing quietly nearby is a dark iron column unlike anything else from the ancient world. It rises more than 7 meters above the ground. Beneath the surface, another section extends deep into its foundation. Altogether, the pillar weighs more than 6 tons. At first glance, it seems surprisingly simple. No elaborate sculptures, no precious jewels, no golden decorations. Only a smooth iron surface that has quietly endured the centuries. Yet the longer one studies it, the more extraordinary it becomes. The pillar was most likely erected during the reign of Chandragupta II, one of the greatest rulers of the Gupta Empire, around the 4th or 5th century AD. An ancient Sanskrit inscription carved into its surface celebrates a powerful king and honors the Hindu god Vishnu. Originally, many historians believe the pillar stood at another sacred location before eventually being moved to Delhi several centuries later. Exactly how such a massive object was transported remains uncertain. Moving 6 tons of solid iron across ancient India would have required remarkable planning and engineering. Imagine the day it first stood upright. Hundreds of workers gather around enormous wooden scaffolds. Thick ropes stretch across the construction site. Elephants slowly pull while teams of laborers guide the towering column into position. Priests chant prayers as the monument rises higher and higher. Finally, the base settles into its stone foundation. The ropes loosen. The pillar stands perfectly upright beneath the Indian sky. No one present could have imagined it would still be standing 16 centuries later. What truly fascinates modern scientists is not the pillar's size, but its remarkable resistance to corrosion. Iron naturally reacts with oxygen and moisture. Over time, rust slowly eats away at the metal. Yet the iron pillar shows only a thin protective layer across much of its surface. Instead of weakening, it has remained astonishingly well preserved. For many years, this puzzled researchers around the world. Was the pillar made using a lost formula? Did ancient Indian metalworkers possess a secret unknown today? Modern scientific studies have provided an answer that is every bit as impressive as the mystery itself. The pillar contains unusually high levels of phosphorus and very little sulfur or manganese compared with many modern irons. During the ancient forging process, these elements helped create an extremely thin protective film across the surface. Known as misawite, this microscopic layer acts almost like a natural shield, slowing further corrosion over hundreds of years. Rather than continuously rusting, the metal gradually developed its own protection. It is a remarkable example of ancient craftsmanship producing results that modern science only fully understood many centuries later. The method used to create the pillar was equally extraordinary. Unlike modern steel produced in enormous blast furnaces, ancient Indian blacksmiths forged the monument by heating and hammering together many separate pieces of wrought iron. Each glowing section was carefully joined to the next while still hot, again and again, until the enormous pillar gradually took shape. The amount of skill required is difficult to imagine. Even producing small iron objects was challenging during this period. Creating a single column weighing more than 6 tons demanded exceptional organization, experience, and craftsmanship. Imagine standing inside one of those ancient workshops. The air glows orange from enormous furnaces. Blacksmiths strike red-hot iron with heavy hammers. Each blow echoes across the workshop. Sparks burst into the darkness. Piece by piece, the glowing metal slowly grows larger. Weeks become months. Months perhaps become years, until one extraordinary monument finally stands complete. Today, engineers, Metallurgists and archaeologists continue studying the Iron Pillar of Delhi, not because it defies the laws of science, but because it demonstrates just how advanced ancient science could become through careful observation, experimentation, and generations of accumulated knowledge. It reminds us that innovation did not begin in the modern world. Long before industrial factories, long before modern chemistry, ancient craftsmen were already creating materials capable of surviving for centuries. Perhaps that is why the Iron Pillar continues to inspire such admiration. Not because it possesses magical powers, not because it is impossible to explain, but because it proves that some of humanity's greatest achievements are often the quietest ones. A single iron column, forged by forgotten hands, standing beneath the open sky for more than 1,600 years, and still refusing to surrender to time. The purple stone reserved only for emperors. What if I told you there was once a stone so rare that ordinary people were forbidden from using it? A stone carved only for emperors. A stone that became a symbol of absolute power. A stone so difficult to obtain that entire expeditions crossed scorching deserts simply to quarry it. Today, you can still find it inside ancient palaces, imperial tombs, Roman columns, and magnificent Byzantine churches. Its deep purple color immediately stands apart from every other stone surrounding it. For the rulers of the ancient world, it represented something greater than wealth. It represented authority itself. This remarkable material is known as imperial porphyry, one of the most valuable stones ever quarried by human hands. Its story begins not in Rome, nor in Constantinople, but deep within the mountains of Egypt's eastern desert. The landscape is harsh. Jagged mountains rise from endless fields of rock. Temperatures soar beneath the desert sun. Rain almost never falls. Even today, the region feels isolated from the rest of the world. Nearly 2,000 years ago, however, this empty wilderness supplied one of the Roman Empire's greatest treasures. Hidden among these mountains lay a single quarry unlike any other. Known today as Mons Porphyrites, it was the only known source of imperial porphyry in the ancient Roman world. The stone itself is instantly recognizable. Its rich purple surface is scattered with tiny white crystals that sparkle when sunlight strikes them. No paint created its color. No craftsman polished it into beauty. The color existed naturally within the rock itself, formed deep beneath the Earth's surface millions of years before the first civilizations appeared. To the Romans, purple carried extraordinary meaning. It was the color of emperors. Only the highest ranks of society could wear garments dyed with the famous Tyrian purple. That same symbolism soon extended to stone. Imperial porphyry became the material of emperors alone. Ordinary citizens could admire it, but they could never claim it. Extracting the stone was an astonishing challenge. Unlike limestone or marble, porphyry is incredibly hard. Even modern cutting tools struggle against it. Ancient quarry workers spent weeks carving deep channels around a single block before carefully separating it from the mountain. Every mistake risked shattering months of work. Imagine standing inside the quarry nearly 1,800 years ago. The desert air is already hot before sunrise. Teams of workers swing heavy iron tools against the dark purple rock. Each strike echoes across the empty mountains. Dust fills the air. The work is slow, painfully slow. A single block destined for an emperor's palace may require months of careful labor before it can even begin its journey. Once removed from the mountain, the real challenge begins. Some blocks weighed many tons. They had to be hauled across nearly 100 kilometers of unforgiving desert before finally reaching the Nile River. Wooden sledges scraped across the rocky ground. Hundreds of workers and draft animals pulled together in perfect rhythm. Water had to be carried across the desert simply to keep everyone alive. Every journey became a remarkable feat of logistics. From the Nile, the precious stone traveled by boat toward Alexandria, then across the Mediterranean Sea, eventually reaching Rome, where master craftsmen transformed the rough blocks into magnificent columns, statues, sarcophagi, and imperial monuments. Walking through ancient Rome during the height of the empire, the message would have been unmistakable. Whenever you saw purple stone, you were looking at imperial power. Perhaps the most famous examples were the enormous porphyry sarcophagi created for Roman emperors and members of the imperial family. Even in death, rulers wished to rest inside the rarest stone their empire could obtain. The tradition continued for centuries. Later, Byzantine emperors also embraced porphyry as the ultimate symbol of authority. Children born to reigning emperors inside a special porphyry chamber of the imperial palace received a remarkable title, porphyrogenitus. It meant, born in the purple. The phrase did not simply describe a room. It declared legitimate imperial birth. A child born there entered the world already surrounded by the greatest symbol of royal authority. Imagine entering the throne room of a Byzantine palace. Golden mosaics shimmer beneath candlelight. Marble floors reflect every step. Towering columns of deep purple stone rise toward the ceiling. The emperor approaches, surrounded by brilliant colors that no ordinary citizen could possess. Without speaking a single word, the architecture itself announces who holds supreme power. Today, many monuments carved from imperial porphyry still survive. Columns remain standing inside ancient churches. Broken statues rest in museums. Fragments appear in archaeological excavations across Europe and the Middle East. Yet the quarry itself eventually fell silent. As the Roman Empire weakened, the difficult desert route became increasingly difficult to maintain. The knowledge of the quarry's exact location slowly faded. For centuries, imperial porphyry became almost impossible to obtain. Only in the 19th century did explorers rediscover the forgotten quarry hidden once again among Egypt's remote mountains. Perhaps that is why imperial porphyry continues to fascinate historians today. Not because it possessed magical properties, not because it contained hidden treasure, but because one extraordinary stone became one of history's greatest symbols of power. A mountain hidden in the desert, a journey across an empire, a stone reserved for emperors alone, and a reminder that sometimes the rarest treasures are not made of gold, but carved directly from the earth itself, vidIQ.